you can turn over loads of money, you could have loads of people working for you, but ultimately if you're not making money at the end, what's it all about? We've seen it where a site built right beside a river, and they used a technique to pile blocks of apartments, and the piles failed.
But if you can you give your thoughts on the aggression from Russia to Ukraine? Welcome back to another episode. If you haven't seen my podcast, my name is Janis Gertmanis and this is Construction Crew Limited podcast. And today I've got another fantastic guest, which I know myself. We have worked on site together, and this man is really smart in the industry. What he's doing in the business, where he is. When I'm listening to this man, he's talking like from the book. It never stops, and I love to listen when people has a knowledge in what he's doing. The man who I have today is David O'Brien. He's doing really well in the construction industry, and I will let him to have his chance and have a bit of a speech about what he did and how far he is in the business. Welcome, David.
Morning, Janis.
I appreciate it that you came over, spending your time with me.
Yeah.
Can you introduce yourself and tell people about yourself? What is your background? Where did you start at? And what made you to do construction business?
Yeah, I suppose if you go back right to the very start, west of Ireland, 80s, education was a big thing. Because the country was just getting itself on its feet after joining the EU. And a number of years previously, the governments had set up education. So it's a lot of strong emphasis on that. So where I went to school, it was very technical, so a lot to do with fabrication, industry, metalwork, technical, all that side of things. Then after that, I went up to Dublin to uni up there and studied in Bolton Street. And a lot of that was all to do with the kind of the finance and the legal project management, quantity surveyance side of the industry. Once I finished that in 95, I went working for a county council on a roads project, I was the only surveyor working for a council in the country at the time. So a lot of what I was doing was providing financial information for the construction team, but also for the reporting that had to go back to Dublin and back out to Europe to get funding to build the thing in the first place. So that was really good grounding because I worked with a lot of really top class engineers and all the delivery crew on the ground. So everything from the work being set out right through to the finished product where cars are driving down the road and bridges being built and everything else. So that gave me a really strong grounding in the process start to finish. So I left that and I went working for a small family business, civils based, and to a large degree it was a similar situation but different type of work. So similar in the sense that you did everything from estimating right through to handing over the finished product to the client at the end. And in that I had a mentor. And I think no matter what you do, you always need somebody who can mentor, right?
Yes.
So you're a little bit younger than I am.
Yes.
Well, quite a bit. I'd like to think it's a little bit less, but anyway, there we go. And everybody needs somebody who's got a little bit more experience, right?
Always.
But then on the other side, you need somebody who's open to receive that information and is interested and keen. So I suppose to a certain degree, I was that person for my mentor. And even 20, 25 years later, I'd stop and I'd think, well, what would Pat do in this situation? So you kind of build on that. So every time you're doing something, you're kind of thinking, you're looking at it, and you get to a certain point and you go, right, okay, well, I need to learn a bit more. So that was really the grounding that gave me the platform to say, right, in 2000 set up our own business, and that was pretty much doing anything from really small works right up to multiple unit residential, commercial. We did some hotels, pretty much anything that needs to be done, because the industry in Ireland is quite significantly different to what it is in the UK. UK is enormous by comparison. So what you can do in Ireland is limited to a large degree because of the volume. So you end up doing loads of different types of work. So it could be something really small like hanging a door up to building 100 houses and everything in between. Whereas in the UK, because the business is so large, you can be very specific and very specialist in certain areas. And that went very well up until late noughties. And, the well-documented crash that happened. And then by the time we got to kind of 2010, work had just dried up. So we managed things reasonably well over a period of years, and then decided, well, we might as well look elsewhere. So I moved to UK in 2013, and spent a few years just getting to know the industry, getting to know how things, because they are different. Everything's different. You know it's different from that view working here. It took, say, 2 years to get kind of familiarised with how things are done and everything else. And then we set up the business, myself and Gillian. So OBM is O'Brien Moran, so that's myself and my wife. It works really well in that sense because we've got a commonality of purpose, so our driving factor is largely to do with the family. And then it means that their decisions are, 9 times out of 10, we'll get to a kind of an agreed position on things, and I'll be called to check if there's a decision that's not quite, because I'm dealing with things on the ground all the time. You're familiar with it and you think, well, every decision you make is perfect, but of course it's not. So then once you chat it through, you generally get to the best outcome. That was 2015. We set that up, and then we've grown things slowly. Step by step, organically. We haven't taken in any funding. We just grown it along the way.
Incredible.
We got a very, very good clients. A lot of them that you know and you're aware of. Some that you're not. And within that now, we think we've got not only we've got clients, we've got good friends. Because to us it's about people. Everything is about people ultimately. Because if you don't build those relationships, then how do you get things done? If you've got friction, it just slows things down. If you've got it's like anything. If you're on the motorway and there's roadblocks ahead, it's hard to get to where you need to be. So what we try and do is build those relationships, and then the delivery process is a lot easier. So that's kind of from where I started out to where we are now. So we've got a good platform. We're at a level now where we can deal with whatever it is that we need to deal with. We can deal with the volume that we have. So we're in a stage now, consolidation, and then we're considering what we're going to do next.
And the reason you moved over to UK was that the crash?
It was, because literally work dried up. The crash in Ireland it literally went off a cliff edge. In a very short period of time, like 18 months, it went from really, really booming to nothing.
Wow.
Like the IMF had to come in to provide support. EU provided support. The country was in a really bad way. It's in good shape now. 12, 14, 15 years later. But at the time, it was really tough, as it was in a lot of countries. But it didn't have the economic muscle to be able to do its own thing and work its way back out of it again. So back then, there were a lot of banks, a lot of funding available. A lot of businesses doing really well, but it was on the back of a false income from property tax. So transaction tax based on things happening. So once things stopped to happen, then the money didn't come in, the tap switched off, and everybody's looking around going, well, what do we do next? And there was nothing to do. Back then, there's probably close on 90,000 residential units being built a year.
Wow.
Now they're struggling to build 25.
And why?
A number of factors. Predominantly the cost of building, the cost of land, and the availability of funds. As I say, there was a lot of funds available back in the early noughties right through until 2007, 2008. But now there's only a limited pool of funds available. A lot of people who had the technical expertise to deliver them are gone because things dry up for 5 years. People ain't going to hang around twiddling their thumbs. And now it's a limited pool who have the access to the funds, who've got the access to the land and the resources, which then means it slows everything down,
Right, so and that's all that all brought you over to UK because of the reason crashes there. You can't see the way forward as much as you was in where you was in the highlights, and then you need to go downhill, but you never wanted to do that.
That's what happens. You see, so I think look at it's an old thing that people say all the time is you learn more from mistakes. And yes, you do. You know, you calibrate things based on your own experience and knowledge. So yeah, that was a massive learning curve for us, in the sense that, you know, sometimes when things are going well, that's the time to stop and just say, hold on a second, let's see where we go next and avoid the pitfalls, you know.
Yeah.
But it was so dramatic that I don't think anybody could have avoided it, you know. Yeah.
So that was rapid decision to we taking it, we go into UK.
Yeah,
and why
absolutely.
UK?
Well, it's fairly obvious, isn't it? It's very close proximity. You know, it's easier for family. It's you know, an English-speaking country. Well, obviously we speak English because we were under English rule for a number of years, and there's a lot of similarity. You know, there's more common things than there are differences. You know, and then there's advantages. Being an Irish person working in England, and similarly for English people in Ireland, it's just the different ways of doing things, and more complementary than anything else. You know, they work very, very well together, because there's different ways of doing things and different attitudes, and you put them together, and it works really, really well. Yeah.
Brilliant. When you go onto the projects now in the UK, well, you established your company, you're working for 7 years, I understand.
Mm-hmm.
When client is asking you for taking over the site where you need to build something, do some groundworks, what is the things you're looking at?
Yeah, I suppose the first thing that we look at is the thing that nobody looks at, which is how you get the thing to stand up. So typically when we get involved in a project, all of the stuff that's above ground has been thought about, because that's the thing people see. The thing they don't think about is what happens beneath the ground. So that's the first thing we look at, and the expertise that we bring, which is how do we deal with these very bad ground conditions. So a lot of the projects, by their very nature, they're on sites that have got bad ground conditions. And it's the last thing that designers think about, it's the last thing clients think about, but it's the first thing we think about, because if you can't get it to stand up, then, or if it's a costly intervention to get it to stand up, then the project's not viable. So we bring a viability to an awful lot of projects that are otherwise not viable by ground engineering and geotechnical expertise. So that's where we start. And then once we've established that, we bring a whole suite of other resources to clients, largely around the initial setup and how they can get the project up and running quickly to achieve their targets. Yeah.
So literally you can take over the site and bring it from start to zero, even with the managing other subbies, which doing other jobs, not only the
correct,
concrete and stuff.
Yeah. So we tend to look at the geotechnical design and build, and then the civils design and build that's associated with projects. Or some of the projects we're on at the moment, there's no civils in them, they're industrial, so it's industrial buildings, that kind of thing. So it's really pretty much giving the client a reassurance that they've got a safe pair of hands and somebody who'll work with them to make sure they get what they need when they need it. And within parameters of safety and also cost, because the way costs are, and as you know, in raw materials over the last 18 months, it's been trying to catch a hare that's running in front of you all the time. When are we going to catch him? And will he ever slow down? So it's trying to get a sense of that. And I think by having a background in that side of the industry years ago, you have a better sense of where things are going to be at the end of the project in terms of cost. So when we talk to clients, we say, look, you can do it on the basis of there's your raw information, but what we tend to factor in is what we know will actually happen. So when you get to the end of the project, there's no big uplift in cost. There's a lot of cost certainty for them.
Yeah.
Because that's ultimately what people need to know. If you're doing a project and you put it into a business plan and you run it through all the metrics on cost and everything else, and if it's viable based on certain costs, you're better off to have certainty in that cost. And if that means that it costs on paper day one, say 3 million quid, as opposed to other approaches that other people take, which is, well, we give a price of 2.5 million quid, but we get uplift of 3. Now, sometimes that can be to our detriment because the cheaper person gets in.
Yeah.
But ultimately, every job has a natural price. How it gets there is what's the variable. So, as I say, what we try and do is give our client cost certainty up front, as opposed to having issues through the process where you're going back saying, well, this is a variation and that's a variation. We give what we know is going to be the end product in the price day one, even though it's not documented on paper, because we've done so many of them now at this stage that we know what's required, even though the designer doesn't know what's required.
Incredible.
Yeah.
How do you separate your clients by I mean, if you have demand and you have multiple clients want to work with you, do you need to separate them or need to make sure they are capable to finance the project? I mean,
Yeah, that's very important. And again, we're fortunate enough that the clients that we work with are well financed, and we check that out in advance. We
to have sources to find out all
yeah,
these clients.
we do. We check them out. We also, in some instances, will say we want to have proof that the funds are available. So obviously, we're not going to commit significant working capital to a project unless the client has got that. And similarly, we're the same with our contractors and our employees. They need to know the money is there to pay them and pay their bills.
Why is that? Is that because of the bad experience? You do all these checks?
No, it's not. It's because it's the right thing to do. So if there's a lot of people out there who use contractors as a source of finance. So what if you're going to commission a significant piece of work, a development of 20, 30 million or whatever the case is, and you enter into that as a developer, as a client, not having the funds secured, then you're doing it on a very, very shaky foundation, and then you're going to run into problems. And we don't want to work with people like that. We want to work with clients who've got everything resourced properly and can deliver and pay on time, And we treat our contractors and suppliers and supply chain exactly that way, that we make sure that the funds are there and they get paid on time, every time. And then that builds a good relationship, and then we actually find that benefits us as well, because a lot of times I'll pick up the phone, I need something delivered in a hurry, and I've got subbies that will drop everything and come because they know they'll get paid on time and they'll be treated well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and that's that is kind of also think what we have. We also need to make sure we always have the line going, where our subbies or our supply chains, they're always chasing us if and it's a bad thing. It's better to pay before they call you.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And the other thing that it does as well is if they're, because it's things are a lot similar in a lot of ways. So if you're a subcontractor, say, that's doing steel fabrication, right? You're going to be out in sites, right? And everybody talks to everybody else, and they have different clients and everything else. And there could be a conversation, well, actually, I'm looking at a new site someplace else. And they go, well, actually, these guys, give them a call and get them to come and look at it. So the better relationships you have with all your supply chain, they're more likely to come back and say, actually, a client of mine is looking at a new site. Would you be interested in giving them a price for it? So it actually brings in work as well without having to do anything.
Just you don't need to advertise
decent and do the right thing, Yeah, so it does help. So we've got a flood of things coming at us now, so it's a matter of just sifting our way through it and picking out the things that fit best for us over the next 18 months. Yeah.
Going quick back on to when you said when you go on to site, you always, people never see what's going on the ground. Everybody sees what's seizable, My question, I believe some of the people who are watching this, they also would maybe have this question: what is the things can go wrong? What is the things? What is the worst thing ever happened? You always make sure.
Well, so it hasn't happened to us, but we've seen it where a site built right beside a river, and they used a technique to pile, right, blocks of apartments, and the piles failed. The whole development was occupied at this stage, and the buildings started to move. And it was like a scene from an Armageddon movie where everybody evacuated and there were massive big cracks. I'm talking about cracks that size up on the third and fourth floor.
Come on.
Yeah, it was quite scary. It was quite famous, the particular case at the time, because it involved building control, it involved the designers of the foundation, the piling contractor, the main contractor, and everything else, and the local authority. So that's why everybody knew about it. But that was it. That was probably as dramatic an example of a failure that you can get. But there's all sorts of stages of failure in between. So if you take the industry that you and I work in quite a lot, which is AD, the tanks have to stand up, and they can't move. But there's a limited amount of movement that's built into them. So if you've got the wrong intervention on the foundation, then the tanks will move, the couplings on the pipes between the various different things will move, and then you end up leaks, and it's a disaster, you know.
Yeah.
So those kind of things are the things that need to be avoided. And there have been cases where tanks have moved, and
I never heard that.
they have moved, and there have been failures in the foundations, which is a disaster, because then it means you shut the plant down, so you got a massive investment, and it sits there, it's mothballed until somebody can come along and come up with a solution.
And why did it move? What's the reason for that?
Because either the design was inappropriate or the installation was inappropriate. It wasn't fit for purpose, because of the loadings in these things. If you don't get the design right, and then you don't get the implementation right, or if you get both of them wrong, if you get the design wrong and the implementation wrong, they're putting down significant load per square meter, and it moves, and it doesn't take a lot of movement on a big tank to make a significant difference, you know. So they've got a design parameter of 25 mil long-term settlement, and we design to that, or sometimes it's less than that, or the loadings are more, but we design to all those things, and we've got engineers who are top-class experts in doing that. And look, one of the things we will say to clients is, it won't work, and if it can't work and it's too costly, we tell them that up front. There's no element of trying to fluff something up and say, yes, well, this probably will work, and it'll cost you this amount, and it'll all be all right in the night. We don't do that. We just tell them, like, we figure this won't work, and it's going to cost you too much money, and you're better off leaving it from our point of view and from a project point of view, because it'll be a mess, you know.
Brilliant. Yeah. Let's talk quick about the AD industry, because these are the peanuts we eat in every day. Yeah. Tell me about when you go onto the AD site, when it's starting from the scratch. Literally, you got filled, ready to go, ready to take a biogas plant on the top of it. Yeah. What is the first things? Because you are the main man who starts the project.
We're the first ones to rock up. So what we do is we set up as principal contractor. So if we're in first, we'll set up as principal contractor, establish the site, get all the controls in place, get the management team there, engineering, surveying, and then pretty much get on with the earthworks operation, which is the first thing to do. There's key drivers in all these things. So, there's a huge amount of work, as you know, in the fit out of the tanks. It's an enormous piece of work, but you have to build the tanks first. And in order to build the tanks, you need to have the containment, and to put the containment in, you need to have the earthworks done. So that's the sequence. So we'd very quickly identify, before we get to site at all, actually, the work starts months before the site actually is established. And that's a key factor in every project, because if you just start thinking about it the week that you rock up with machinery, well, you're losing before you start. So we've worked out a sequence on every project before it starts to make sure the tanks can start on time, that the tanks are finished on time, and then that the fit out that you guys are involved with actually rolls out on time, which then means that all the other key targets that fit in further on down the line can roll out as well. So that's the earthworks, followed by a lot of the containment system. So we've developed containment systems in conjunction with engineers over the last few years that are now considered industry best practice. So the Environment Agency have picked up on them and say, yeah, you do that, fine, and it's signed off on. So we then deliver that, and then on comes the next contractor, and while they're doing their thing, we've moved on to the next phase. So if there's something like, feedstock storage, like silage clamps, they have to be done by key dates so they can bring in feedstock. So we now know exactly the sequencing in every project, and we can then keep ahead of everything as and when it needs to be based on the final delivery date, you know. Yeah.
How do you prepare the basement for the tanks? I know tanks has been built by other company.
Yeah.
But the base plate, is that what your company is doing?
Yeah. So again, if we go back to, well, where does it all start? It starts down to the ground. So in some cases, we're treating ground 6 meters below the level because the ground condition is that bad. So yes, you improve the ground right the whole way up. So if you take it that typically people think a foundation is the concrete, but the foundation is the soil and the materials that sit beneath the concrete. That is the foundation.
I could be possibly one of the typical guys.
Yeah. So the foundation is what it sits on. So if you've got rock, it's a good foundation in its own right, if it's in a quarry or something like that. If you've got good clays, they can be good in their own right. You just have to re-engineer a bit. But if you're in a site that's got fill, so we had a site a number of years ago, a borrow pit. So they dug a big hole, took out all the good clay, and then filled it up with, horizons from sites over a long number of years. which is all good and well if you're just going to leave it there. But if you're going to build an AD plant on it, you need to make sure it's fit for purpose, and it's not to support a tank. So we ended up digging down 6 meters and re-engineering all the soil back up to give a platform to build the tank. So that's the starting point, that's the foundation. And then on top of that, a containment system, which is typically a geomembrane, and then on top of that we've got a reinforced concrete slab, and then on top of that the tanks are built. But it's all designed for containment, so you make sure that no liquid can get discharged into a water course. It has to contain, in the event that there's catastrophic failure of a tank, that it contains everything inside the containment area.
I can remember years ago when we started in UK, and I used to work for the company who did all the pipeworks fabrication for AD industry. And the first sites when we came over to UK, I think there was only a couple of them where they could still be built only tanks on the field. With no any, like nowadays you yourself you're building the bund walls, everything is contained, in case of disaster. Those sites which being built under those regulations, that at that time they still keep running as they are. I haven't seen any of them improve the safety.
They have, and there's a process underway now where they have to be fully surveyed and certified by an engineer, and if there's improvements required to improve the containment, they have to do the improvements.
All right, because I haven't. I'm thinking, because I never been on those sites
since then.
When we built, I haven't seen how they improved, because I know they used to rather than using concrete and making bund walls, they just earth mountains. They built
which
it
works
up,
in some cases, because
but still soil takes the liquids into it.
Canals, for instance, they retain water. They're artificial, so they're lined with clay, and clay will retain the liquid. So you can build a containment system that is clay.
Okay.
To get it approved now under the new guidelines is more difficult. So using a concrete containment system, albeit expensive, it's pretty much bulletproof, and it'll get approved every time.
Of course, but it massively increased the expenses of the site.
Absolutely, But
all the pipework is stainless steel and goes above the ground instead of going into the ground as we did it, years ago. So now, when you are finished on the tanks, then what is the next steps? What is the first things? Because I never been. To be honest, through the years when we built sites, I've never been on site from literally when the tanks goes into the building from scratch. Because, we've been called, tanks are ready, bam, you can go, all the heating systems, gas lines,
So the next key thing is going to be making sure the containment system is completed, which is the wall right the whole way around. And then after that, if it's a food waste plant, the building is key, because there's a huge amount of fit out in there, as you know. So if you think about it, you've got the where the tanks are, a lot of fit out in there, and then the building, there's going to be a lot of fit out. So you get those two done, and then all the interconnections can be done as well. And then while they're being done, there's gas upgrading and gas technology areas that need various different interconnections done, and slabs to support new equipment. So that's the order of precedence. Containment area, so tanks can be built. Then the feedstock, whether it's a building or a clamp, that needs to be done. And then all the other ancillaries, which are further on in the build process. So
how is the timescales when you see you got the project, they want you to come and undertake all the jobs? What is the timescales usually? Are they really tight?
Very tight, because the process that the clients go through is they have to obviously do due diligence on the site, and then go and get funding. And once they get financial close, typically there's a connection date that they need to achieve. So the time is absorbed going through all that process, but the end date is fixed, so then the time to build is reduced down. It's very, very tight.
And if you can't get in time, what is the kind of contracts? What is the punishment if you don't finish at time?
We never had that problem.
You always finish at time.
We always will work with the client to make sure they can get to where they need to be. And there's always a way around things. If one thing I've learned in the industry over 25, nearly 30 years is, if you come up against a problem, you treat it like a wall. There's always a way to go around it, over it, through it, or under it. You'd get around it some way. But if you adopt the approach that, we got a problem, we have to stop, down tools and clear off until somebody else sorts it out, that's where it doesn't work. So that's one of the things we like to bring is an attitude that we get things done one way or the other. And if a client comes to us and say, hey guys, you know, we've got a serious situation here. It's not our problem in a lot of cases. We actually have clients that come and say, well, look, can you have a look at this for us, even though it's something that's not related to what we're doing, which is a good thing because it means it's based on that relationship. And, you know, we try as best we can to come up with a solution that will help them to get to where they need to be.
And that's what they're waiting for, the support from...
That's the way it should be, you know.
Yeah.
That's the way it should be.
I mean, you know, when you help, you always build that relationship what you was talking about, you know.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
How many sites you have in the same time?
We have
what is the
3 to 4. Yeah,
and you can easily manage around and work on...
It's never easy, you know, but
of course,
over the last
business is
years,
never easy.
Yeah, it's never easy. So, you know, but over the last number of years, we've developed systems and processes that make it easier. Yeah. And we've got a team of people now who have done and delivered a number of them. So it's almost intuitive now. So rather than say, well, we need to organize this and get it's done, because they know what needs to be done.
Yeah.
And that's good from our point of view, because then you can build more capacity, and you've got more ability to deliver more. So that's where we're at now. We're at a kind of a, you know, we're at a consolidation where we can comfortably do, you know, 3-4 a year, and then it's just a matter of building more capacity by additional management. We can spread out the resource we have, so we've always got somebody who's worked on them, which is unique enough in the sense, because we'll always have somebody who's built one of these things before. Yeah. Which helps because it gives clarity then when you're trying to get things done.
So systemization for the business is the key really to make it a lot easier.
Everything's a process. So, you know, hopping in the car to drive here this morning, there's a process. But the difference is, because you're so familiar with it, it happens naturally and organically. So what we're trying to do in what we're to improve is to have everything as much as possible a process, so people do it intuitively. They don't have to think about it. So if the process is good and it's logical and it makes sense, then you intuitively get something done. And if it's done that way, it's more cost effective and efficient, you know. So that's what we're trying to get into an awful lot of things. And standardization as well. So on each site we've got a standard system for management and delivery. So if we've got a manager who is off on holidays and we need to drop somebody else in, well, it's not like he's trying to work around to see where things are. And then to try and bring those principles onto the ground as well. So if we're on a new project and we've got the same team that worked on a previous one, pretty much you give them a set of drawings and say, away you go. You know, obviously with certain parameters in terms of the key things that need to be delivered in the order of delivery. Yeah.
Brilliant. What is your own plans for the next couple of years? How you see your business growing?
We see there's an opportunity, I suppose, on a number of fronts. The industry, because of the gas crisis, there's an awful lot more activity. So it's been quiet in the last 8 or 9 months, which we expected. So we kind of segued across into another sector, which is milling and in industrial type buildings. And that's filled a nice gap for us, but it's also given us an opportunity as well. So we provide those clients with a principal contractor's role, so we can pull all the strands together, do all the programming for them, and make sure they get their projects delivered when they do, albeit in a different industry. Then that has given us an opportunity to grow there. We now know that the AD industry is set to take off again in 23-24, and we've got 2 or 3 new clients. We've got a lot of projects in for tender at the moment. I think we've got about 6 that we're looking at. So if some of them come off, which I fully expect they will, that's a form of growth in its own right, because it's new clients in a similar field. And then we've got, the milling now as part of a suite of what we do. And then we have the principal contractors function, which we're finding a lot of clients are very interested in that, but for 2 reasons. One is it manages their health and safety, but it also gives them a structure. So you get clients who are, really good at what they do, but they have to build something that's beside what they do, and they want to have the least amount of impact on their operations. And we've managed on a number of projects in the past to keep operations going while the bill goes on, when the client expected to have to shut down for a period of time, right? So that's something we want to look at. And then we've got some opportunities coming down the line where we purely go in and do the ground engineering. So sites where clients were typically thinking about piling, we've one at the moment where everything else they've done on the site was piled, and we've come up with a solution that saves them $500,000, and means that something that they were thinking about mothballing and not doing is now viable for them to build based on that solution. And it's the first time we've had a client come to us and ask us to look at a site before they had anybody else look at it, from a design point of view, because a lot of the time we get to a site way down the line, design has been advanced, and then you're trying to rework things that have already been done. This time it's from the ground up, design from 7-8 meters down there, and get that platform, get that foundation, and go from there. Then they can build whatever they want on it. Typically it goes the other way around, that you've got, I know the building I want, or I know the shape that I want, and then eventually you get all that done, then somebody goes, oh well, how are we going to get it stand up? And at that stage, if you've budgeted say 2 million quid to build something, and then somebody looks at the foundations and go, well actually you need to pile, it's going to cost you another $500,000, the project's not viable, but you spent a hell of a lot of money getting to that point through design and various other things. So that's the first time that's happened. So we want to develop that part of the business as well.
Incredible. Mm-hmm. Would you call your own business as a family business, or?
Oh, very much so, yeah, absolutely. So it's myself and my wife, and that's it, in the sense of, decision-making process is very quick, because, there's not a lot of people involved, yeah.
Would you ever consider to cooperate with someone and make it bigger, rapidly bigger, if there would be an opportunity?
No. We're happy in the scale and scope of what we have, and growing it step by step organically is the way we'll go. Yeah,
and it always can go up to a massive business anyway.
It can if we choose, but sometimes bigger is not better.
Of course, yeah. Of course,
it's a common mistake people make, that. You think that, well, having a bigger turnover will create more profit. Well, it does by volume, but not by the chunk that's at the end. It creates an awful lot more layers of management and control and cost, So you have to increase by multiples to get the benefit. Yeah.
So you need to make really smart decisions and understand what you...
Absolutely, yeah. It's all about the numbers, ultimately. Yeah. Like, if you get the numbers right, then, you don't need to be turning over 50 million.
As a family business, if you're already working on a project which is 20 to 30 million pounds, it's incredible though. Because some businesses are running in between a couple thousand pounds.
The overall project is 20 million. Our aspect is
of course, yeah,
2 and 4.
But still, it's a lot of money for someone. If I imagine the numbers, they are still huge numbers. For me, where there is a people who just turn in around maybe 100 to 200,000 pounds a year. Mm-hmm. And they think they've got a massive business.
Yeah, but it's all relative, isn't it?
Of course, it depends.
It's what's in your range of ability, I think it's, what does some movies, a man's got to know his limitations. And to a point, that's something that when you learn that, then that gives you the ability to look at things more objectively and like that, say, right, okay, that's enough. And sometimes knowing that it's enough is really important.
Where's the OBM based, and what's the range where you work?
Yeah. We cover the whole UK. The only part that we haven't worked in is the north, not the UK, England predominantly. So the only part of England that we haven't worked in is the northwest. So we've worked up.
Somewhere where we are now.
Somewhere up around here, yeah, exactly. So
that's where I believe, if everything goes well next year, we might have a project in northwest.
Yeah, exactly. So then that'll be the full geographical area covered
in England.
Yes, yeah.
But Scotland also
potentially, yeah.
Potentially, yeah. And this is the area where OBM can work, but nothing further like abroad.
No, I think. Potentially, back in Ireland, because we've got an ecosystem over there that we're familiar with. But further afield, no, we probably provide support to clients, there. But in terms of having boots on the ground, probably not. No, it wouldn't make sense from our point of view. It dilutes down our core business, which is delivering for clients, and like that, having that relationship. So, if we change our focus, then we may well let our clients down.
Yeah.
And like that, it's a lesson learned in the past, that we had a really good client and we got busy doing other things. And then when things stopped, that client had moved on. So it's a matter of, if you got good clients, treat them well and stick with them.
So what you're saying is you concentrate on the quality instead of quantity.
Yes, yeah, and by its very nature, then you get the yield out the other end that you want. Because it's that whole thing. You can be a busy fool. You can turn over loads of money. You could have loads of people working for you, but ultimately, if you're not making money at the end, what's it all about? Or if you've got twice the turnover, but your net profit at the end is the same or slightly more, then what's the point? You're a busy fool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
And that's it. It's just known when there's a sensible approach to take things. Years ago, I was a young electrician, and he started out. He's doing some work for us, himself and an apprentice, and he knew what he did every week. He knew at the end of the week how much work he'd done. He knew how much he paid his apprentice, how much his van was, phone, everything else. And I said to him, "What's your plan?" He said, "Oh, well, I want to have X number of crews over a certain period of time." So I just explained to him that by doing that, at some point, by the time he gets to crew 2 or 3, he's going to end up being off the tools himself. So he's going to lose the value that he adds. So he went on that journey. And 10 years later, I was talking to him. I says, "How are things going?" He says, "Well, I got up to 5 crews, and I'm back down to myself and an apprentice now." Because he figured he would have to get up to maybe 10 crews to double what he was making when he was on the tools himself.
But it's all about managing, isn't it? Because out there is loads of massive companies where they've got
layers
possibly
and layers.
hundreds of crews.
Yeah.
Where they're doing and they still keep delivering and do quality.
Yeah.
It depends on what kind of persons you have in business and how good you can manage.
It does, and it depends on what type of person you are as well. I think from our point of view, we do tend to maybe sometimes want to have too much control, and that, but that's what we're comfortable doing. Whereas if we were to take in more and more layers, it kind of dilutes down what we bring to a project in the first instance. Because we'd say to our clients, you'll have one of us involved from the start to the end. There's always be, myself or Gillian will be involved from start to end on a project. So they know they're talking to the boss effectively. That, and to a large degree, that's a big part of it. That if there's a decision to be made, there's not layers and layers. You're not dealing with a team of QSs, or you're not dealing with a team of engineers. We'll do all that. That's our job to deal with them. You just deal with us. And if you need a decision or an agreement on something, it'll be sorted rapidly.
Yeah, and that's really good thing, because I would be the same kind of person. Which if I would work with someone, I would love to work direct.
Yes.
And talk direct with the decision maker.
Correct.
Instead of talking with somebody who's maybe never gonna tell you what I was asking.
No, and then the other thing that could be an interpretation is it depends on who you're talking to in a business. So if you're talking, say, a surveyor in a business, and he's then dealing with his director or manager, well, there's an interpretation in the conversation you've had by the time it gets there.
Of course.
If you're talking directly, there's nowhere to hide. That's exactly what I mean. Can we agree on it, or do we have a dispute?
Brilliant. Yeah. By the sound of all of what you explained, it sounds like you're doing really well. Yeah. People who would love to get in contact with you by watching this video, how they can contact OBM? Is there a website? Is there the social media you use?
You've done remarkably well, because you know what I'm like on social media, pretty much non-existent. So here you have me on a podcast. So no, it's pretty much mobile number. Give us a
mobile
call.
Number.
Yeah, that's
but
it.
if I'm the farmer, and I need these whatever maze places to be built in concrete. Mm-hmm. Where can I dig your number out?
Oh, well, that's a good question, because if they look at this, I'm going to give you the number now. So,
I mean, I know, I had no social media, I had no website, and I had customers calling me and say, "Listen, we tried hard to get your contact."
Yes, of course, yeah.
He said somebody, and literally this was funny, Yvonne. One of the big water treatment companies in the country, Severn Trent, they tried to get in contact with me. Mm-hmm. Somebody in Northern Ireland gave them a contact about from us, and because they needed some of the mixer changings or roof openings, and they got contact in Northern Ireland, and because they couldn't get any.
Yeah, and this is the thing, you see, we're not really good on that side, so it is something that we need to get our act
That's
together.
what you're going to work on, and then people are going to be
Correct.
able
We're
to
going to
find
be
you.
working on that over the next 6 to 8 months. So we'll have.
But it tells me clearly that you are busy enough.
We don't even have a website. You know.
Yeah, but that clearly makes me feel that you are doing really well.
Well, it's all by contact. It's all by getting contact numbers. People like that will ring up saying, "Do you know somebody who can do this?" And then we get a phone call from somebody else that says, "Can you come and have a look?"
And it's incredible how, when you deliver quality and good job, how the other customer or the client you was doing the job for is telling someone else. And you don't need advertisement. You don't need anything,
You
literally.
don't. No.
You don't even need any cars wrapped in company names and blah, blah. They just spread your name around.
Well, we just had a contact recently from a new entrant in, a new funder for a new project. And it literally was like that. They got our contact details from
somewhere.
Yeah, and said, "Here, go talk to those guys." And again, it's another example where we're involved in a project before they've even got planning, so we can advise them on right from the ground up, you know, or below the ground up. So that has worked very well for us in the last number of years, and obviously an add-on to that, and other opportunities will come from having more of an online presence. Yeah, which but we haven't seen it being a necessity up until now. Yeah.
How the political situation in the world changed your material prices, what you use for your business?
Massively, you know. So some very basic products have gone up, you know, 200%, which now is reasonably okay to deal with because the worst of it's over. Well, hopefully it's over. But back in kind of early part of 2021, when a lot of the increases were happening, we were just starting projects. So we committed to deliver a project at a certain price, and our raw materials in some cases were going up by, you know, 200%. That doesn't mean that the project goes up by 200%, obviously, but as a factor on the project, you're talking about probably 7-8% overall. But what we managed to do was just redesign different aspects and try and keep the cost increase to a minimum, you know. But it's difficult. I mean, it was very difficult. But now I think it's settled. It's settled at a higher level. So then when we're pricing new work, it's the new cost base plus, you know. And I think because the value of the end product has increased, that clients are prepared to pay more on the back of having a more valuable end product themselves.
Was this increase more likely on every product you buy for your sites?
Everything across the board increased, but some things far more than others. So steel is a good example. At one point there was a shortage supply of cement because a lot of the cement kilns were shut down. So that's stabilized again as well. So, but yes, a lot of the significant materials that are used went up a lot, you know.
I don't know, you would like to talk on the podcast about your thoughts on the crisis, but if you can you give your thoughts on the aggression from Russia to Ukraine?
Well, obviously the impact that's had is global. You know, I think one of the biggest issues is that there was an opportunity probably missed to kind of resolve that a long time ago through negotiations and through big calm heads. So whatever the geopolitical situation is and the reason for it being what it is, unfortunately the people of Ukraine and neighbouring countries are getting hammered in the back of it. And yeah, I think a negotiated settlement is pretty much the only way that's going to get resolved. But unfortunately, in between, you're going to have a country and its people terrorised and damaged beyond belief, which in 2022, to have that happening on the continent of Europe is shocking. You know?
Yeah.
It's absolutely shocking. And it's all good and well. We're sitting in a nice, cosy room here, you know, safe in England.
Yeah.
But it must be unimaginable torture for them.
Oh yeah, it's a disaster.
Yeah.
I believe, you know, families you know, they need to leave their houses, they need to run away.
Yeah.
And you know, to get some protection. And the good thing is that Europe gives the hand, you know, and take the people, you know, UK especially.
Yeah.
You know, with all these Brexit stuff, normally none of EU residents now can't really come over and stay here and live. Versus UK said, listen, you know, it's a disaster there. We're going to give you a hand. You can come over and, you know, live and have an opportunity to have a work house where to live. And it's really good that we're helping them people to come back.
Still not
Yeah.
good enough, though. I mean, you know, those people are, you know, hundreds and thousands of miles away from home, and there is no home anymore.
Yeah.
You know, there is some family, they'll never see them again.
Yeah.
So it's hard to put that into context when you haven't experienced anything like that. You know, it really is. So it's dreadful. It's dreadful and unnecessary. The whole thing is completely unnecessary. Could have been
Yeah.
avoided years ago if the right interventions had been made
Of course.
at a level between the United States and Europe and Russia and Ukraine. You know, but unfortunately, it's gone way beyond that now.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to go on. It's going to be one of those things that will get to a certain point and it'll rumble on for, you know, a number of years. But parts of it will never be resolved.
Yeah,
Never,
of course.
ever be resolved.
The only thing we can hope they're gonna end the war as soon as
Yes.
possible,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
literally it's not point for that. Well, there is political reason for that, which some people might think it's right, but the guns and you know the war disaster, what happens there is not a solution.
No,
you know,
no.
diplomatic stuff would be
That's
the way
it, ultimately.
to
But
take.
unfortunately, you don't hear any of that at the moment. Early on in the when the war started, there was talk about, you know, meetings in Turkey between both parties to try and negotiate a settlement. There's no talk about that at the moment. So
Yeah.
hopefully that will re-emerge sooner rather than later, and then try and get to a settlement with, you know, before too many more people die and lives are ruined.
Of course,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
And I suppose what it does demonstrate is how fragile the world is. So obviously COVID was a good example of that, how
Yeah.
fragile and how that wiped across the globe. And now we have this going on, and all the grain. How many people realise the significance of the Ukraine in terms of its production of grain that feeds, you know, 20% of the world,
Yeah,
or the importance of the gas supply that comes from Russia? You
Yeah.
know, people are blissfully unaware of the significance of these things. We all know about it now, which then means that a lot of which ironically is beneficial to the likes of what we do, that energy security is crucially important.
oh yeah,
You know, if you come in and you switch on the boiler and the house heats up and you've got hot water for a shower, who really cares where it comes from?
yeah. Nobody
Until such
thinks
time
about it.
as it doesn't come as easy, or it costs 3 times the price. So yeah, there I think people will be more aware of it, but the ability to do something about it is very, very limited.
Close to zero.
Very limited. Yeah.
Hopefully they're gonna finish on the war. It's gonna end in some
Yes.
soon point. People could be capable to go back and you know try to build the country back and live in their home. You was touching a bit on the COVID. How COVID did impacted your business, or
But fortunately enough, it did not impact hardly at all, because it was considered, you know, whatever the term at the time was, something like a significant industry, so it had to keep going. So we had 9 weeks shut down, and then after that it was pretty much as normal, other than the protocol that had to be put in place for distancing and various other things. But again, because of the nature of the work that we do, it's majority is outdoors anyway. So it didn't impact to a large degree. In fact, it demonstrated that when we set the business up, we set it up on the basis that we were going to get involved in things that people will always need. So food is what people always need. So a lot of, like to a certain degree, AD is very closely linked to agriculture and food production. So they're either built on an agricultural basis with feedstock of crop, or on food waste. Right?
Yeah.
So either which way, you have that happening all the time. And other aspects that we do are agriculture related as well. So that is, but if we were in residential, for instance, or commercial, an awful lot of those just came full stop.
yeah,
Yeah. So ironically, the decision that we made a number of years ago paid off, because we stayed away from the things that are more impacted by recession or downturns. And again, it goes back to that whole experience of once you've been through a recession, you're far more aware of what's likely to happen quicker, you know,
Yeah.
and you put things in place to try and avoid those. So yeah, so no COVID, as I say, other than some protocol in terms of how you deliver things on the ground, but in terms of business, it didn't have any impact at all.
brilliant. Because we had no bad impact, you know, through the COVID, because
Yeah.
we even had more job than ever we had before.
Yeah.
Which was really interesting for myself. I never linked the biogas with the food waste and stuff, that we
Yeah.
need to run. And because I always thought, we are energy kind of stuff, green energy, electricity, gas. And that's one of the reasons why we keep going, even in the recessions or whatever happens. Usually, year by year, when we was working, January, February was the months where it was really quiet. The projects were finished, or they was freezed for the winter time. Now in the COVID, zero breaks. Like we went through every day, every month, and it was incredible.
And at the same time, then you had people who didn't work for 6 months.
Yeah, which was months. Also,
so it's
sad.
Fortunate, but it's probably the first time when you can't call it a recession, but a significant impact on an economy has happened, and the construction industry hasn't got hammered, because typically capital investment just dries up.
Yeah.
So if there's a downturn, well, maybe we don't need that warehouse, or maybe we'll hold off on building that hotel. But in this case, because of the nature of what we did, and a lot of construction was considered essential, it just continued on.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
David, it was really fantastic to having you today. If you could give some couple motivational words for the young people who want to jump in the business world, doing hard work, what would be the thing you would give them a bit of a push so they get more confident?
I think the industry itself is really good for younger people. There's a lot of opportunities, and if you got somebody who's switched on and is prepared to work, then there's massive opportunity, and the income they can generate very early on is quite significant. What surprises me is, you can come out of school or college or whatever with virtually no experience, get some training, start working on a construction site, you're earning 25 grand a year. There's not many industries that offer that.
Yeah.
And then if you're open to opportunity and continue to train and then learn of what you trained and then train again, and you can progress very quickly to a point where you've got a significant income and a very steady one. And then the industry itself, by its very nature, you meet different people all the time, so you can enjoy yourself. So a lot of the time people say, well, the work is too hard. And yes, it can be. But the rewards are there to go along with it. And if you box clever and you're prepared to listen and learn, you get on very, very well. And if you've got the right attitude, like if you've got the right attitude and you want to run your own business, you can. Or if you want to be part of another business, you can. So there's so many opportunities, so many different areas that you can go into, whether it's commercial, industrial, heavy civils, road, there's just aviation, you name it. It's every sector. Because construction touches everything. Every building that people are in is built by a team. So, if it's medical, there's specific things in, so it's not boring for somebody. But I think what puts off a lot of the younger generation is that whole aspect of being out on the ground, the dirty, hard work. Yes, that's part of it, but the rewards that you can get out the end are massive.
Of course.
And the thing that I would advise a lot of younger people when they're trying to get on is a very simple word that's very important, is why. Ask why all the time, learn and ask why. Well, why are we doing this? And then if you really understand why something is done, you're adding a lot of value to yourself, because the next job you go on to, why, or you work out a better way to do it. But you're adding value all the time, and I find it's something that's not used enough with younger people, in the sense that they just go and do rather than ask why. Not in an annoying way, but in an inquisitive way, in a way that's adding value to themselves, and then they'll get the benefit of that down the line, and ultimately, if they want, get to a point where they're running their own business.
Brilliant, guys. That was David O'Brien from the company OBM. He's based in Sussex in England, and I hope you took a lot of good things out of his speech today. And if you need to get him in contact, you definitely want to work with David, I will put some of the details of himself down in the description. Please comment how do you like this video, and I see you in my next one.